404, this is 7, stand by a minute. Just come on, what is your attack angle?
Okay, talk to him, see what that did. Charlie Horse, 88.
24, traffic 275.
85 just made a pass in there. Can you give us any?
Go to 21, Sandy 7.
Standing by, over.
Okay, I'll put it a little closer than those trees. Let me come around with a Lao 3 and I'll put it on those trees there.
Roger that, allow 3.
My name's Warren Blanchard, nicknamed Doc, and that's, if anybody needs to know, that's because of my last name, which was the same as the famous football player from West Point back in the mid-40s. I entered the Air Force in '68 and went through pilot training at Laughlin, and from there I got an assignment to the A-1 Sky Raider, went through training there, and found myself in Vietnam as a brown bar, second lieutenant. That was probably 4 months before I automatically increased my rank to first lieutenant. And so anyway, I was sent to Pleiku as my first assignment up in the Central Highlands of Vietnam in the 6th SOS, Special Operations Squadron. And flew there for about 4 months, developed my pinpoint bombing technique there, and then the powers that be decided to shut the whole squadron down, take all the A-1s out of there and move to Nakhon Phanom, Thailand. And it wasn't more than a couple of months when I got there that they decided that they weren't able to cover the mission down where Pleiku had supported, down in what we call the tri-border area. So they asked for volunteers to go back to Pleiku, TDY. And I think there may have been 3 or 4 people who decided no, but the rest of the people who had been there said, yes, I want to go back to Pleiku, because it was a great place, really. But that didn't last for long, because they finally realized that they were paying us TDY, and after 2 months they were running out of money, TDY money. So we got to stop this. So they decided to set up a so-called detachment. They called it an operating location for certain reasons. Mainly, we had a permanent change of station, PCS. We couldn't be TDY because then they would have to pay us per diem. So they looped around that. And we all moved up, we all who manned the operating location, Alpha Alpha, as it was called, moved to Da Nang.
So that's where OLAA was born?
That's right.
Okay.
That's OLAA. And
it had a very specific role compared to the other squadrons, because when you said that it was the mission, or
yes,
they couldn't cover the mission.
Well, covering the mission meant 2 different things. It was too long of a flight from Nakhon Phanom to get down in the tri-border area that had been previously covered by the Pleiku 6th Special Operations Squadron. But when we got up to Da Nang, the reason it was formed up there was really by directive of the air staff from the Pentagon. Because the Army was doing a special operation called Studies and Observations Group, SOG, and that was these teams that were formed of 2 Americans and the rest, maybe 6 or 8 indigenous troops, Montagnards or South Vietnamese special forces. And they would be dropped into the jungle, over in Laos primarily, and sneak around in the jungle and gather information on the movements of the NVA. And if they could, they would sabotage something if they could. If not, they just brought back information to learn what the movement was, mainly on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And they needed air cover, close air support when these teams were inserted and when they were pulled out, or in the case of an emergency, when they were discovered, they had to get out immediately, and we scrambled on those, and that was called Prairie Fire. And they said you will have these 8 airplanes at Da Nang on call at all times to cover those SOG missions. And that's basically why we existed over there.
And you were, as a unit, OLAA was there for just over a year, weren't they? Maybe 2?
I think verging on 2.
Yes.
Yeah, wasn't very long because the SOG activity ceased not long after I left. I left in, I guess I forgot to tell you, I got there in '68 in August, and I was there until, '69 August, and then I left, went back to the States in July of '70. And it wasn't long after that the SOG operation was disbanded, and they just stopped doing it.
It was a heavy toll on manpower for the Army, because I've heard that they had 100% casualty. You either got killed or you came back wounded, and their mission was extremely hazardous. But I know from talking to the Green Berets, when they knew they had a Sky Raider around, man, they were pretty bold. They knew if the VC were coming, they were going to make them pay dearly. Can you talk to me about a Prairie Fire mission? As far as I've heard, the altitude you operated at was extremely low when you got into those situations.
Yeah, it was pretty low. We didn't have any restrictions on how low we could go. It was how low do you need to go to put the ordnance on a mark. And these guys, when they got in trouble, sometimes asked for us to drop right on top of their heads. We tried as best we could to miss them. Sometimes we didn't miss, and there were some. I don't know of any SOG troops that were killed as a result of our drops, but there were some wounded. But that was the only way to save them and get them out of the jungle.
I don't think people understand the waves of men that would come from the North Vietnamese, or they just can't. Their tactic is overpowered by waves.
Correct.
And the only way to keep that off is a curtain of steel.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
That's what you guys provided, whether it be, can you tell us about a mission, anything that you remember on any of those?
Oh, sure. Well, one thing you just pointed out, they come in waves. And whenever the close air support planes, especially the A-1s, came in within hearing range, the bad guys, the North Vietnamese, would stop firing because they did not want to be detected. And what they would try to do is squeeze in, close in as close as they could get to the team so that they wouldn't get dropped on, because we didn't want to drop on the team. We wanted to drop on the perimeter of the team. So that made it very dicey on a lot of missions. I was on one as lead, and I recall we were being called in to pull a team out. And of course, they got pulled out by Vietnamese helicopters, King B, and those guys were good. And they did the best they could, but they couldn't get in or out unless we provided close air support. And the team was being overrun. And they put out a panel on the ground that we could spot. They didn't release smoke or anything because that would attract. This was something you could only see from the air. And I saw the panel. My wingman did not see the panel, but he thought he knew where he needed to drop. And when he did drop, it dropped just about right on top of them. But they called back and said, knock it off for a second. We've got some injuries, but it's okay. That's what we heard on the radio. Don't worry about it. It's okay. We've got some wounded, but we're going to get out because it pushed the bad guys right away.
From what I hear, the North Vietnamese had a philosophy in battle. It was grab the American by the belt buckle and get as close as you could so that air power and artillery were rendered useless. So you were always there trying to keep them from getting to that really close, because they could overrun with those
Exactly.
waves.
Yeah. It's funny. It's not until recent years that we've gotten to know any of those ground guys, those special or studies and observations groups, the SOG guys. We've gotten to know them now personally.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, one of them was our guest speaker 4 years ago at the reunion, and Tilt Meyer.
Our buddy Tilt.
That's right.
What a character.
And he, way better than I can tell you what it was like down there on the ground. But we always joke when we get together with them, and we said, we can't believe you were crawling around in the jungle, basically under the feet of the Vietnamese on the trail. And they turn around and say, we can't believe you were up in the air pointing your ass at the ground. We would never do that. We wouldn't think of doing that. It's too dangerous.
Have you read Tilt's book?
I have.
Did you read the one chapter?
Over
where
the fence.
Where the Vietnamese soldier actually stepped on him when they were hunting for him?
Yep.
And Tilt goes, that's the scariest moment of my life because I had a choice to open fire or hope he thought I was something else, but they actually stepped on him at night.
Right.
And he just held his breath. And the two trackers kind of just drifted down this ravine.
Didn't ever know they were there.
Yeah.
That's the amazing thing about those guys. I got to give every ounce of credit to them for what they did. But when they were detected, that's when the shit hit the fan. That's when we would have a prairie fire emergency. And we had at least 2 birds on armed standby on the ground at Da Nang. And we had 2 pilots who were on alpha standby, we used to call it, Bravo Alpha Alert, and they slept in their clothes with their boots on, with all the equipment they needed to run and jump in that airplane and go fly. The other guys were on Bravo Alert. They could get out of their clothes and go to sleep in the bunk. But as soon as the Alpha Alert guys scrambled, then you became Alpha Alert, and you had to get dressed and get ready, because we could have 4 airplanes out there trying to get a team out of the jungle at any given time.
Were you in when Operation Tailwind happened?
I had left. I left in, as I said, July, and that took place in what, September?
I think so, yes.
September 70, yeah.
Which was an unbelievable mission. And
Well, it was the mother of all SOG missions, mother of all prairie fires.
Yes.
It was
there
amazing.
was 112 or 113 guys on the ground 40 miles behind the lines.
Yeah,
And they had been going toe-to-toe with Vietnamese for, 3 days, 4 nights?
right.
Something like that.
Right.
And it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
But
And that in itself could probably be produced into a movie, exciting movie.
yes.
Yeah.
And I know that Gene McCarley
Yep.
spoke incredibly highly of, I think it was Tom Stump and Chris Tadishi?
Tadishi.
Yeah, Tadishi.
Yeah.
They were the 2 guys that got in because the weather had closed in so bad. And the attack was, again, waves. I remember hearing the helicopter pilots talk about, he said, it was like one of those films, He
Yeah.
said, there's just guys coming from everywhere. And he said, I'm just sitting there and he said, they were close enough they could have thrown a grenade in. And he said, they must not have had any grenades. The ramp was open and they were coming up and guys were shooting guys right there. And when they pulled out, and
Yeah.
the Sky Raiders had pushed back the wave enough that they could get those guys
Right.
out.
Right. They got the heavy lift helicopters in there. The Sea Stallions, I think they were.
Yes, they
That's
were.
the only thing that could carry that big of a load of troops.
Yeah.
And just the escape was hair-raising enough
Yes.
from the stories I've heard.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I didn't get to participate. That would have been something else. One other guy, longtime friend of mine now, Chuck Casebeer, also ran a mission out there on that. Yep.
Can you tell me about any of the other, did you participate in any SAR missions? I think you guys were doing SAR and,
Oh, yeah.
all right.
Yeah. I'd have to say our primary reason for being there, like I said, was SOG. But if there was a SAR and we were able to respond to it, we would of course we would launch. And we covered some SARs primarily over in our territory along the Vietnamese-Laos border. And one I particularly remember was I'm sorry because I don't have my notes, but I think it was Cowboy. It was a Marine OV-10 that went for a joyride out there. He was showing his buddy around the area of operation, and they got shot up and went down. And that developed into a SAR. We were trying to get those guys out. And, typical SAR, it varied depending on what the situation was with anti-aircraft and so forth and the terrain. But generally speaking, once we located the survivors or survivor and pinpointed their position, we would start, the flight of A1s would start a daisy chain, or what we called a daisy chain, around them and just start unloading ordnance. Willie Pete, forward firing, miniguns, 20 millimeter, and just trying to suppress any ground fire that we could, and lay smoke, of course, lay a smoke corridor so that the helicopter could run up that corridor without being seen and pick up the guys.
How wide would the corridor be?
It depended, but sometimes it wasn't very wide.
A couple hundred feet?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Right. It just depends how accurately we laid down the smoke screen. But it had to be wide enough for the Jolly to get in there and
not
turn
have
around
the
and get
rotor
it.
wash push it
Exactly.
out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was in the daisy chain, and all of a sudden I got a rough running engine, very rough. And when the A1 loses a cylinder for one reason or another, it shakes the airplane so bad it feels like it's going to come apart. And so I didn't know why, but there was smoke. And I just peeled off and dove right in the smoke, right toward where the Jolly Green was. I didn't go down to that altitude, but I went into the smoke, out the other side, called lead and said, I've got a problem. And our leader, Jim Wold, who was our commander, he joined up on me, checked me over. He couldn't see anything wrong, but the engine was still rough. So he escorted me. We left the fight, and he escorted me back to Da Nang. They picked up at least one of the guys. Like I said, my notes are, I'm hazy on that, but it was either one or both, we got them out. And it turned out that I had been hit by a 12.7 machine gun round, went in through the engine cowling and knocked out one of the coils on one of the cylinders, and that's what gave me the rough engine.
Wow. So when it gets down to it, and I'm going to ask you an emotional question here, what was it like for you when you knew somebody was on the ground? How did you put yourself in the position to say, I'll do whatever it takes to get that man out?
It wasn't a hard decision. That was our job, and you didn't think twice about it. You went out, you organized as best you could, talked to the people on the ground and in the air, and you figured out how to get the job done, and you did it. I don't know of anybody who ever thought twice about going out there and doing it. No hesitation at all.
I was just curious if there ever was,
Well,
because if
you gotta live through it. So you got to be careful on what you're doing. You got to be smart about it.
Yeah.
But you don't hesitate at all. I can say that truthfully.
Now, let's talk about when you brought a survivor back or a team back. I've heard that you've had some really good times there, and it was always a way to bring morale up, I would assume, compared to the times when you lost somebody.
Sure.
So, so with the party, now, when you were in Da Nang, it wasn't the land of party suits. From what I hear, it was kind of a different experience.
It was definitely different than what it was like over at NKP, because they had 3 squadrons at least the time I was there, and a lot more people. So that meant a lot more party suits. But we did have our party suits, and we went to the Doom Club.
The Doom Club.
The Da Nang Officers Open Mess.
Oh my gosh, I've never heard that name.
Yep. And we did have parties. We partied a lot with the Jolly Greens, because that's where they, the Jolly, we shared the same hooch with the Jolly Greens, so we got to know them really well. And of course, when we brought back a guy, they would bring the guy back, of course. And there would be a big gathering on the flight line. There are pictures of a lot of different SARs where when they bring the survivor, the rescue guy back, it's an elation, big celebration. Yeah.
Pop
Now,
champagne.
exactly. Yeah. The Army guys, when they got brought back, they went back to their camp. They got brought back to their camp. We never saw them. We didn't even know them. Not until years and years later, 40, 50 years later, have we finally gotten to know them.
You went to SOAR, did you not?
I did. Yeah, I've been there 3 times. It's a great reunion. Have you been there?
I have not.
Yeah, I would say it's a must. Yeah. I don't get there very often now, and it's because of timing conflict.
Yes.
They always have it in October, and there's always something else going on in October, and I haven't been able to get there.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to tell me about your experience in Southeast Asia?
Well, you know, when we all get together, it's very upbeat. We all feel good about what we did over there. But I'm afraid I have to say it was very frustrating and disappointing, and it wasn't our fault. It was the decision makers. Because the day I left, nothing had changed from the day I got there. And that was the frustrating thing about that year in Vietnam. We thought we were accomplishing something, but we were stymied.
When it got down to it, from what I understand, you were there for the guy next to you.
Of course.
That was the mission. The true mission was whatever it took to save American lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Doc, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I know you were trying to dodge me for a couple of days, but I was tenacious.
I hope I helped.
No, it was great. It was great because I have absolutely zero about OLAA, and that sheds some light and gives me a little bit of documentation because it was one of those things.
Take one. Fast move.